Thank you for agreeing to write test questions for the RAB QSA International Examinations. Your input in this point of the test development process is critical in ensuring that tests contain material that is appropriate for a program. The purpose of item writing is to develop test questions that will measure specific parts of a content area. These items will be reviewed by other subject matter experts and then used to develop full exam forms that will effectively measure examinees' knowledge and skills. Each test question that is written must be valid, reliable, and clear. The extent to which test questions meet these three characteristics begins with the item writing process. As test questions are written, we want to be sure that they measure what we intend them to measure. This is what is called validity. We must be sure that test questions will be effective and will consistently measure the knowledge of the test takers. This consistency in measurement is considered reliability. One way item writers can ensure questions are reliable is by writing items that are clear and unambiguous. Since the results of the RAB QSA examinations will be used to make certification decisions, it is important that the test questions that make up the exams are appropriate. With your participation as a subject matter expert in item writing, you are aiding in the assurance that the examinations will be valid and reliable. You were selected as an item writer because you are knowledgeable in the area that is being tested, meaning you are a subject matter expert, and you are familiar with the individuals who seek to become certified. With your content knowledge and knowledge of the population of the examinees, the items you write are likely to become valid and reliable measurements of the examinee's knowledge. Once you complete the short training, you will have sufficient information to begin writing items. The primary objectives of this item writing training are to provide you with an understanding of basic test development guidelines, to provide you with access and information to various standards that will help assist your knowledge of writing fair items, to provide you with methods you may use to write test items, and a means in which you will be able to recognize when your written items are valid and clearly written. And finally, you will have a good understanding of your role as an item writer. The act of writing items first and foremost takes knowledge of the subject area, and then it takes knowing which pitfalls to avoid when writing items. In order for proper decisions to be made based on the exam results, examinations must be shown to be valid. Validity is the extent to which the test measures what it intends to measure. The test questions that make up that examination helps to support the overall validity of the examination. Each item should be proven to be measuring the specific domain of knowledge that the exam is meant to measure. When the results from tests are shown to be consistent, the test is said to be reliable. Test reliability is measured for each examination as a whole, for the individual test items, as well as for the scores that are obtained from the examinations over time. Test questions are reliable when the types of responses received by examinees over different exam administrations are consistent. It is also important to an item's reliability that examinees who are content experts actually select the correct answer and are not distracted by the other options enough to select them. The results from examinations are reliable when the results that are received are consistent over time. For example, if several samples of examinees were selected from a population of candidates and each of these samples were provided the same test, the results from these different groups of examinees should be fairly consistent. If so, then the exam can be said to be reliable. An item is a question that appears in a test or a survey. The stem of an item is the opening question or statement. The options for an item are the possible responses to that stem. There should be one key, which is the correct answer or response to the stem, and then several distractors, which are the incorrect responses to the stem. Since examinations are intended to test specific content knowledge, every part of an item must be based on the content of the standard or the reference being used. Oftentimes, content knowledge is shared among industries, so it can be easy to slip into the mode of testing content knowledge that is actually learned on the job and cannot be supported by the written reference. When items have options or correct answers that are outside the scope of the references that support the content domain, there is a risk of testing content knowledge in a narrow industry. For some RAB QSA examinations, the examinees are allowed to use the reference materials as they take the test. As a result, it's important that the items are not written in a way that will measure an examinee's ability to use their search and find tool in their PDF reader rather than their current knowledge. Oftentimes this occurs when items are testing trivial knowledge areas. A great example of such an item is one that asks what an acronym stands for, or asks the examinee to cite the clause that a specific statement is from. An item such as this will not measure the examinee's application of the standard or their content knowledge. It is extremely important that the items be clearly written so that examinees are able to properly display their knowledge of the subject. Items may be fairly short in length and still measure meaningful concepts. Be sure not to include unnecessary words in an attempt to make the item more robust. Oftentimes the added length will simply remind examinees they are taking a test, and they will begin responding to the items by relying on their test-taking strategies more so than on their content knowledge. Before you begin to write items, it is important that you first become familiar with the competency unit or the test specifications, as well as the references for the content area. If a specific topic has not been assigned to you, you should choose one that will enable you to easily begin writing items. If you have never written items before, choose a topic that you are fairly familiar and comfortable with so that you may set a good process for writing for yourself. Once you have established a writing routine or technique for yourself, then you may wish to write for areas of the competency unit where you would like to review or increase your knowledge. You may find that by writing items in content areas you have not been exposed to for some time will make this work an enriching experience. Each of you will establish your own method for writing items. I would like to propose this process as a starting point. As many of you may know, writing is not always a linear process because writing is a creative process. Even writing test questions begins with a creative process. Fortunately, we do not need to be great writers to write test questions. We need to be content experts first. With practice, we become good item writers. A basic item writing process begins with identifying a stem with a correct answer, or a key. Distractors tend to be more difficult to identify, especially for individuals who are content experts. Once the stem, key, and distractors are identified, the item should be reviewed to ensure the options match the stem in structure and that all options are structured in a similar way. When writing items, it is often helpful to think about real-life situations when the specific knowledge is applied. When thinking of distractors, try to think about common mistakes that individuals new to the field might make, or common misconceptions that new trainees have before they are trained. Avoid revising the words in the key to create a distractor. By simply revising words such as always in a key to never in order to create a distractor introduces an element of trickiness into the items that is not necessary. This can be avoided by ensuring that each option is unique and cannot be viewed as a subtopic of another option. Do not use all of the above or none of the above as options. In test taking, these options are only appropriate if they are going to appear for all items in a test. And the use of these options is more appropriate in an educational setting and not in a certification setting. Since the purpose of our examinations is to determine whether applicants meet the knowledge requirements, it is important that we always provide them with one correct answer to choose from within a list of options. Since writing distractors can be difficult at times, it is quite efficient to borrow distractors from one item and use them in another item. If you are writing several items on one topic, it can be quite economical to share concepts for distractors among the items. There are pros and cons to sharing distractors among items. One pro is that it makes item writing more efficient. One con is that items that have common distractors cannot appear in the same exam form. However, this particular con is not a problem when a program has a large pool of items. When you are tired from writing items, take some time to review the items that you have written. Item reviews are what makes items stronger. We ask that item writers review their work before submitting it to RAB-QSA, and we also arrange for an item review committee to review all items before they are placed into a formal exam. Since it is sometimes difficult to identify trick questions, I'm going to share some trick questions with you now so that you might be able to identify when you have written one. In this item, the STEM asks which character the actor Boris Karloff played that brought him the most success. If you would like to take a moment to identify the correct answer on your own by searching the internet, feel free to pause this video now and do your research. Before we identify the key to this item, let's examine each of the options. Option A, Frankenstein, is an attractive possible key because in the 1931 movie Frankenstein, Karloff appeared as the monster. Karloff went on to appear in the movies Bride of Frankenstein and Son of Frankenstein. Many people who think of the monster in the movie consider that character to be Frankenstein. Option B, Dracula, is actually a very good distractor because this horror movie was also released in 1931, the same year as Frankenstein. Option C, a scientist, also makes a good distractor because there is a character who is like a scientist in the movie Frankenstein, but that role was played by Colin Clive. This role was actually listed as that of a doctor, but one who is not knowledgeable of this movie topic may not make that distinction. It turns out that our key is actually option D, the monster. While many who know of the movie view the monster as Frankenstein, he is actually Frankenstein's monster. The reason this particular item is a trick is because there is wordplay between the STEM and the four options listed. Boris Karloff is most known for his work in the movie Frankenstein, where he played the monster. Only those individuals who notice that the item's STEM asks for the character that he played will choose the monster. We must remember that test taking is an experience filled with stress, and items are often read fast. I can guarantee you that many very knowledgeable movie buffs will see Frankenstein as the first option listed, choose it without remembering that the STEM asked for the character and not the movie title, and will move on to the next item without considering the remaining three options. To remove the trick in this item, the STEM should ask which character in the movie Frankenstein was portrayed by Boris Karloff, and then options A and B should be revised to other characters in the movie such as Henry Frankenstein or Baron Frankenstein. Or the STEM could be revised to which movie brought Boris Karloff his greatest success, and then options C and D could be revised to other movies that were released in 1931, or they could be revised to other movies that Karloff appeared in that were not as successful. In this particular item, the examinee is being tested on math concepts by using a sentence rather than an actual equation. When reading the STEM, some examinees will translate it as 50 divided by 2 plus 40, because they may have perceived the STEM to read divide 50 in half. And some examinees will translate it as 50 divided by 1/2 plus 40. In one sense, this original item may test the examinee's ability to accurately translate the mathematical terms in the STEM into an equation. However, if this is the true purpose of the item, then the STEM should be which equation accurately reflects the following statement, and a list of equations should be shown as options. If the true purpose of the item is to determine if examinees can divide using a fraction, then the STEM should be please solve this equation, followed by the second equation to be solved. The four options may remain the same as those shown here. As of right now, option D can be defended as a key. However, we are doing a disservice to ourselves with this unclear item because it will not accurately identify all of the examinees who know how to divide with fractions. Many of them will be tricked into choosing option B. If this item was kept in an exam as it is now, its results would affect the overall reliability of the exam.